Welcome to Shotgun, a podcast from East Coast Car Rentals where every road trip and every passenger has a unique story. Now, today's guest has a very unique story. In fact, she probably has more unique stories than most of us. We might need to dedicate the whole episode just to this intro. She's been monikered with names like Queen of the Dust, the Wanderer of the West, and more recently, Queen of the Safari. Edwina Robertson is many things to many different people. An incredibly talented and revered photographer, rural advocate, social media guru, and adventurer are just a few that come to mind. Ultimately, though, she's a storyteller, and she's equally at home in telling the stories of those she meets or opening up to her audience with candid and honest stories of her own. It's this raw and unfiltered approach that has captivated not only just Australians, but people all around the world with appearances on 60 Minutes, BBC, CNN, and more. Welcome to the podcast, Edwina. Does that about cover it? I feel like we haven't really scratched the surface there.
Jeez, Ben, you can introduce me anytime.
Well, I feel like that's not even half of it. I've followed you for 10 years on Instagram and I saw that you were back in Australia and I was like, I've got to talk to Edwina.
My grandfather used to say to me, he used to call me the blowfly because he said I never used to be able to sit still. So maybe there's a good reason for that. And I understand this a little bit more now as I get on.
But you've also seemed to got a unique ability to create viral moments. Is that like a purposeful thing or is that something that's just found you throughout your lifetime?
I'll tell you my biggest secret, Ben. Whenever I try to do something, say do something that goes viral or get traction, or I have this amazing marketing idea and I reach out to someone, it never goes anywhere. Half the time I don't even get a response. It's when I don't try that all these things happen. So the secret to any virality or doing anything that could, have some severe engagement or spread far and wide is to actually not trying. That is
just do it by accident. Just pledge money to every share on Facebook for something and set yourself broke.
Yes, exactly.
So let's start there. That's where it started for me in terms of knowing who you were. At the time, you were a wedding photographer specializing in rural weddings. And there was one particular photo that set off a pretty big conversation about the drought in rural Australia. Was that your first viral moment?
Yes, that was. I had the quickest introduction to learning about PR in this moment.
And expensive.
Oh, yeah, it was pretty expensive. I think it's paid itself back a few times since then. So that was 2015. Western Queensland was in a pretty bad drought at the time. Had been in drought for at least 2 years by this stage. And I was invited to go and shoot a wedding at Blackall, just south of Longreach. And I was quite taken aback by how dry it was and I guess the community, what it meant, what drought meant to the community. And after I got back home and was editing photos, I sort of wanted to share that story of how drought affects communities. And it's not just dry, barren land. People leave town and jobs get lost and it affects people's mental health and all this sort of, there's these huge roll-on effects from drought. And so I wanted to share that and spread that message a little bit further to sort of your metropolitan area and metropolitan population. So I put up this post with a bit more information about drought and I said and this is when Facebook was cool, right? So I put this post up saying for every share of this post in the next 24 hours, I'll personally donate $3 to a charity that specifically supported mental health in rural Australia. And honestly, I thought it would get shared 100 times. It got shared, I think it got shared like something ridiculous, like 600 times in the first hour or something. And I was like, oh dear, this is not good. Anyway, it got shared like 4,975 times in 24 hours.
Did you at least put a cutoff on it? Because there's probably still people sharing it.
Yeah, there are. It's been seen millions and millions of times. But it was shared basically 5,000 times in the first 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you do 5,000 times $3, that ends up being 15 grand.
Whoops.
Yeah, I had a few heart palpitations watching, especially at 6 o'clock the following morning when all the farmers get up and wake up and, they're having their morning coffee and they're doing their morning scroll and, I'll just share that because I guess the weight was on me. It took nothing for them to share, but obviously I was the one taking the brunt of the action of them sharing. But consequently, it went viral. It was, in the Huffington Post, in the BBC, on CNN. Like, it was crazy. I remember I was actually, the next day I was driving to Brisbane to buy a car. I lived out sort of near Gundawin in northwest Queensland southwest. I don't even know where I am at the moment. Southwest Queensland.
You travelled too much.
Southwest Queensland, and I was driving to Brisbane to buy a car, and on the way to Brisbane, I had like 15 phone calls from radio stations, and I'd never dealt with PR or I'd never done any of that before, so it was a quick learning curve, but it had a really positive effect to actually get some awareness around the drought and get the government to start sort of acting in a way to support these communities. So yes, it cost me $15,000, but I think the payoff for the general population who are affected by the drought, it was beneficial for a lot of people. So
well, it did, and it put the drought and particularly rural Australia in the spotlight for a little while, if not until one of your later viral moments, which we'll come to in a minute. But the next one for me, the Wanderer tour, where you decided to pack up everything, jump into it. Was it a 1979 Land Cruiser?
That's correct. Short wheelbase.
Alice?
Yes. I think it was I've just had a mental blank. So a BJ42, so a diesel, short wheelbase Land Cruiser.
And because you were broke after spending $15,000 on donating to charity, you did this trip without any money in your pocket, and you travelled around Australia by bartering your services. What made you do that?
Well, actually, funnily enough, so my dusty drought photo, the viral photo, that went viral in September 2015. And after that kind of, the virality of that lasted for a good few months. Like, I was doing speaking gigs, and even for probably 6 months after, I was still had quite a lot to do with that particular moment. But I realised from that how storytelling can connect people. And if you have an image with it, it can even be more powerful. And growing up in the bush in Glen Innes in northern New South Wales, I realised that, like, something that's close to my heart is sharing and connecting more of what happens in west of the Great Divide to those metropolitan populations and areas. So for 100 days, so this project was called Wander of the West, and I took, as you said, Alice and my dog, and deliberately took no money. So this is in 2017, and I got in the car and did a lap of the map. And yes, technically bartered my photography services. So I did family portraits and commercial shoots and everything for people who lived in rural and remote Australia, and in lieu of accommodation, a tank of fuel and some food. And it took me 100 days to get around Australia. It was quite effective, like sharing how it is to live in remote areas, getting your mail delivered by plane, or homeschooling, or, school of the air, distance ed, all this sort of stuff, that most people have no idea what it's like if your closest town is 300 k's from you. What does life look like if you live that remotely?
I mean, at least on the eastern seaboard, most places in the cities, you're within a tennis ball throw of buying milk.
Yeah. So that trip was an amazing trip. It was hard not having any money, really pushed the limits. I lost a fair bit of weight on that trip too.
I was going to say, Australia is a really big country and there's not that many people out there. So at any point, were you worried for your own health and safety?
No, I never. Actually, it's funnily enough, I think the more remote you are, the more people look out for you. And I had someone helping me do the logistics of the trip. So they were, I knew where I was going every day. Like people would actually invite me to their property or their station or wherever I was in Australia. So I knew I had a destination every day. One day I drove for, I think it was 650 kilometres, but I'm only doing 80 Ks an hour. So it still took me nearly 10 hours.
Yeah.
And I didn't see a single vehicle on the road. It's pretty isolated.
It is pretty isolated, and you'd want to hope that there was a family on the other side who were willing to barter your services for a meal at that point.
Yeah. So, yeah, look, that was in sort of in the northeast corner of the territory. So it was quite remote. But I was never worried. Like I always felt people had my back more in the bush than they do even when I've lived in Brisbane in a 5-level apartment block. I didn't even know my neighbours there.
Yeah. There's definitely something to be said for the state of community in regional Australia and at East Coast particularly, we're big advocates of tourists getting out there. And I think we're starting to see it in Australia, at least domestically. People are wanting to go and have a look, spend more time, a little bit less time on the beach maybe, and a little bit more time driving through regional towns in Australia, which is great.
100%. Yeah. And actually on that trip, I rolled Alice about 2 weeks in. Not by doing anything stupid. I just got stuck in sand and it was top heavy and I rolled the car and then I had to rebuild it. So rebuilding a car when you don't have any money on you, that's not the easiest thing I've ever done. So I had to sort of, negotiate with people and get people to help me. And that was near Alice Springs. But it was amazing how many people just wanted to help. Like, you don't get that in these urban areas. Like, people in the bush will literally give you the hat if you need it.
Do you think it helped also that it was, 2016, 2017?
17.
That it was kind of prior to social media really exploding, or do you think it's just always been like that, will always be like that?
I think a combination of both. I think, as I said, Facebook was kind of the cool thing nearly 10 years ago, 9 years ago. Instagram, you couldn't do any stories or reels or anything like that, wasn't a thing on Instagram. The Facebook sharing, but also I think just if you go far enough and you break down on the side of the road, people are gonna help you.
Yeah.
I think that is just how it is. Like you have to, when you live in the bush, when you live regionally or remotely in Australia, if you don't have other people's backs, like you'll get nowhere. Like
Absolutely.
What goes around comes around. There's always a mate helping a mate. And I think that is the most beautiful and most understated thing about rural Australia is the communities and people helping others.
So the trip didn't just capture their attention. Went pretty viral again when 60 Minutes decided to jump into the passenger seat of Alice for a little while as well. And I was like, hang on, that's Edwina again. She's on the
Pop
news.
up everywhere. Yeah, so I was very fortunate. There was a few reasons why I did Wander of the West. One, I wanted to challenge myself. I haven't read the book, embarrassingly enough, but I watched this movie called Tracks, which is about this woman called Robin Davidson.
Yeah, I know it well.
Who walked for anyone who doesn't know, she was in the late 70s. She walked from Alice Springs to Broome with some camels. And I saw this movie and I was like so inspired by her story, this young woman doing something that everyone told her she couldn't do. So then I saw that and I was like, what can I do that's a modern day adventure? And taking no money was that kind of, like anyone could drive around Australia with money, no problems. But when you don't have any funds and you have to be resilient and you barter your services or your skills to survive, like it changes the whole dimension of what that trip looked like. So Yeah, so that was my modern day adventure. So that's the first part is I saw this Tracks movie and that inspired me. But also I really wanted to promote rural and regional Australia a bit more, and having 60 Minutes pick up the story and then showcase what I was doing was like the cherry on the top. It really pushed it out to a wider community and audience.
Yeah. So at this point, between the dust photo and this trip and the media associated with it, you've built a pretty decent platform and profile to be an advocate for rural Australia, which I'm sure you were before, but the platform had grown since. And then the next time I saw you on the TV, happened to be falling into the arms of former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull a year later. Tell us about that moment.
So I did Wonder of the West middle of 2017, and then I was back shooting weddings, and then in 2018 we're sort of still dealing with drought, but instead of just Western Queensland being in drought still, it was a lot of New South Wales. And I was seeing a lot of kind of statistics on the news and mainstream media. 95% of New South Wales is in drought. Well, what does that actually mean? It doesn't really mean much when you say it like that, but I was like, well, maybe I can start to humanize this a little bit more. So literally within 10 days, I decided I was going to get on the road and just donate my time and drive around. I specifically did New South Wales at the time, and go and meet people who were drought affected and families and take their photo, tell their story, and make people aware of, if you're in drought, if you've been in drought for 6 months or 12 months, what does that mean for your family? And then that really sort of exacerbated the media and mainstream media were like, oh, okay, maybe we should do a little bit more about this, and helped fundraising, and obviously the government stepped up a bit to offer a bit more financial help. But meeting Malcolm Turnbull, so I'd been on the road for about 5 or 6 weeks by this point, and I was doing huge days, like 16, 17-hour days, meeting people, doing media, trying to really advocate for these communities. And then I heard Malcolm Turnbull was out on what they called like a drought trip, to go and look like he's actually doing something. Yeah. And I was going in full blaze to be like, mate, you need to do more here. Like, the government is doing bugger all. You need to step up and help these communities. And I was feeling really confident I was going to face him and stand up to him. But sadly, about 2 days before I met with him, I had been visiting a family, and whilst I was in their home, sitting down with them, talking about how the drought was affecting them, they got a phone call and their brother-in-law had just committed suicide. And so I had experienced firsthand what drought had done to their family. And that was pretty confronting for me. And I was already pretty tired and pretty run down because I'd had a fair few big weeks on the road. So I don't know what happened when I went up to Malcolm to be all bravado and strong and, give him what for. I just fell into a heap. I was just emotionally couldn't hack it. And yeah, so I was all over the mainstream media and news, crying in Malcolm Turnbull's arms.
But you know what? It probably had a bigger impact. The fact that, again, that went viral, and it allowed that message to get out, probably more so than if you just went and shirt fronted him over it.
Exactly. Yeah. So look, it wasn't it wasn't part of the plan, but that's just, I'm human. I have emotions. And when you're seeing people suffer like this and people give up on life because it's so tough, that's really confronting.
It's really confronting. And for yourself too, you're trying to earn a living and run businesses and live your life, and you're wearing the weight of a lot of this on your shoulders because you've become a bit of a spokesperson for these issues too. So how did you juggle all this stuff? At one point, you went on board with Revlon, the health and beauty brand, to shine more light on those sorts of rural areas. Did you find it hard to juggle your own life and career and what have you with some of that advocacy work?
Look, I always did advocacy work, particularly for drought-affected areas and rural communities off my own back. Like, I think for me, that gives me a sense of personal purpose because as a rural wedding photographer for so many years, my business had always come from the bush and I'd been supported by these communities. So I always felt like it was easy for me to want to give back to them. I think advocacy work, like there was never any money in it for me or really like personal gain. It was always about other people. But I think in terms of feeling purposeful, that always gives so much more than any financial sort of kickback could. I did some work with Revlon. I was like a spokesperson or the face of their brand. We raised, I think, off memory, 150,000. Oh gosh, I think it's about 150 grand we raised by selling. They donated $2 from every Revlon lipstick they sold over a period of time. So there was 150 grand there. To be honest, I think if you have the ability to help others, then that should not be wasted. And I could do that through my photography and my storytelling and just being real about things, being authentic. Like, I think that really matters. And I think people take you more seriously when you are authentic too.
So is that a conscious decision by you? Because having followed for the last 10 years, if I had to sum up as a viewer or follower, that's what I see would be why so many people sort of connect with you. And in the prep for this podcast, I went through some of your posts and the comments, and like, I don't know if you know all these people personally, but the comments that you get are so personal, and people are really quite vulnerable in some of the stuff they share with you. And I think that's a result of you stripping back and doing that yourself on your platforms.
Yeah, I get a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you're an influencer," and I just die inside because I don't see myself. I think there's a lot of fakeness, and there's a lot of well, for lack of a better term, right now there is a lot of fakeness in the world, and I think when you are authentic, that people can see through that really quickly, and I can't be fake. Like, I'm just not built to be like that. So I think, as you said, when you're vulnerable, it allows other people to be vulnerable. And social media has its positives, but it also has a lot of negatives. And if you can show up and be yourself online, you will attract people who appreciate that and value that. Yes, it's not for everybody, but it's for those people who are part of your crowd. And I think, look, I've never done anything on social media for anybody else. It's my platform, so I share what I want. And if you like it, great. If you don't, okay, that's cool. No problems.
Do you ever find it hard or confronting to be so open with strangers?
A little bit, yeah. Like, I share a lot, but there's also a lot of things I don't share. You know, I still... people think they know everything about me. I'm like, well, that's not always the case. Like, some things I like, no one else needs to know this, but I try and often share. If I share something and it helps one other person, is it worth sharing? And I'm like, that's how I base what I share. So I've spoken about my own mental health. After that advocacy work in the drought in 2018, when I had that moment with Malcolm Turnbull, and seeing yourself all over the news crying in the Prime Minister's arms is really confronting. I actually had some PTSD after that. After that whole, not that one experience, but doing that advocacy work, because I had so many people calling me, people I'd never met, and just divulging that they were like really in a bad, dark place. And I'm not...
It's a lot to take on.
It is a lot. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained to deal with this, and I would help people as much as I could, or try and direct them in the right way to go and see professionals. But that's a lot to take on other people's, I don't say baggage, because it's not baggage, it's people's reality of dealing with these hard times in the bush. But yeah, I wasn't equipped to deal with that. And that was quite hard for me to come out of that. And, you know, we're all human. Like, I think it's human to have tough times in life and good times in life. And I think as far as I see on social media, everyone always wants to share the highlight reel. I probably share more of the, oh, that wasn't so great. But it keeps it real. It keeps it real. I think people do appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. I think they do. I think it really goes, I mean, the success of your social media profile and your platform, and you've done a lot of different stuff. You had a lot of different businesses, podcasts, you name it, you've done it. But I think a lot of that's kind of just been rooted in that authenticity.
Want the secret to cheaper car rental? Go straight to the source. When you book direct with East Coast Car Rentals, you're grabbing yourself a better rate, more flexibility, and zero friction. Enjoy great cars, great service, and great prices. Head to eastcoastcarrentals.com.au, book direct, and save today.
All right, so tell us about some of those businesses. So you've had podcasts. You had a fashion label at one point as well.
Yes. I've done a lot. I'd like to think I'm reasonably entrepreneurial, and I've got a busy brain, so I need to give that busy brain something to think about, I think. So yeah, look, I've been a personal trainer. I've been a wedding photographer. I had a podcast. I've had a started and sold a fashion label, moved to Africa, and then was a safari photographer over there. I've had during COVID, whilst I was a wedding photographer, obviously I lost work pretty much overnight because of restrictions and lockdowns and travel and whatnot. So I started a consulting business. Yeah, I've done a lot.
How many business cards do you have, Edwina?
I don't even know. I've never owned a business card in my life. Do you know that? I'm a bit like started and hope for the best. Like a lot of people, I have a dear friend that does a lot of preparation, is all about branding and getting a website up. And I'm like, oh, I've got a business idea. I'll just tell everyone I'm doing it and then figure out the logistics of it later. Which is pretty wild, but it's worked so far.
It has.
It's probably not where you go to. I've never been to uni. So I'm a bit of I call myself a faux-tographer, F-A-U-X, because I've never even done a course, self-taught, but, you know, it works. So if it ain't broke.
Exactly. So one of those businesses, I don't know if this was a company name or not, but was, I read Women Making Gravy. And that one struck me because I'm like, that's you. Whether that's you being entrepreneurial to literally make gravy for yourself and pay your bills, or barter around Australia for food, water and shelter, or even just advocating for other people to share that with them. That's a pretty amazing summary of your life, I guess. And you pivoted multiple times. You ran a business where you helped rural women to discover social media and use social media to grow their own businesses. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so that actually was the business was called Women Making Gravy. So during COVID, when I lost 9 months of weddings overnight, pretty much, that was like, oh, goodness, what am I going to do now? And then I just started reaching out to a few people who had businesses and were like, how do we pivot? How do we, one business, for instance, that I helped, she just started a catering business. So we had a consult and I was like, why don't you start offering, everyone's stuck at home, why don't you offer like platters and cheese boards and stuff to deliver to people on the weekend? Why don't you do that? And that one simple idea just absolutely catapulted her business. She's got a huge catering company now. And that was I was like, maybe I can creatively help businesses pivot during COVID, those initial first few months. And that's how Women Making Gravy was formed.
So basically using your busy brain to get busy for other people.
And it actually did really well. Yeah, it did really well. But then I sort of went back to weddings and sort of slowed up that kind of work. But it served its purpose during COVID for sure. Like it was all we could do everything online. I did some, before lockdowns became really tight, I did some workshops in rural areas. And I think we trained like over 800 women in like 4 weeks or something.
Wow.
It was pretty crazy. I like to push all the boundaries, including my own physical and mental boundary at times.
Well, speaking of physical boundaries, then you decided, hey, I'll just go be a Jillaroo.
Oh, yes. Yes. So in 2019, I was supposed to injure my shoulder, and being a photographer, you kind of need your shoulder. Fancy that. And I was waiting for surgery, but I didn't actually need it because I was a very good girl and I did my physio. That's my life advice to you, Ben. If your physio tells you to do something, you should do it. And I had 3 months of work. So I went and I was like, I want to be a cowgirl up in the north. And so off I went. And
that's good for a shoulder, being on a horse.
And I actually broke both my collarbones doing that. I fell off the bike one day. So I chased cattle around the north of Australia, and that was an eye-opening experience.
I bet.
Yep. I saw a few things that probably aren't recommended to be talking about on this podcast. But look, I do have a bit of a life where the glass is half full, more than half empty. And my biological dad passed away he was killed in an accident when I was really young, and he was 40 when he passed. And I've always lived my life. I think his legacy to me was go and live your life as much as you can, because you don't know when your last day is. And I think that's how I live my life now, is I do as much as I can, because every day we have is a blessing, really. You just don't know when your last day is coming. So that's how I think, his passing is his legacy to me, to do as much as I can.
And Africa.
Oh, and Africa.
So what you've gone from, had you just explored every morsel of Australia and went, I'm going to find another continent to explore?
Well, funnily enough, I just had this. I never lived overseas and never really had the opportunity to. And I know most people go and live overseas in their early 20s, right?
Normally like in London.
Yeah, they go to London or, do stuff like that. But I had this, or Dubai or whatever, and I had this, I was like 38, I think, when I went, maybe 39, 38, 38, I think. And I just had this desire to go to South Africa. I don't know why. I'd never been there, didn't know anyone there. And so I just went, righto.
So you didn't just go for a holiday though. You went, oh, bugger it, I'm going to go move over there.
Yeah. And then I was living in Cape Town and had the time of my life. And 3 months later, returned to Australia, sold everything I owned and went back.
And you ended up in Botswana?
Yeah. And then I met someone, I had a partner in Botswana, and I was working I would say the world's only personal safari photographer. So I started this business going on safaris with wealthy clients and taking their photos for them. No one else in the world that I know of was doing it. So I was the first person to do this. And I was working, in the Okavango Delta in Botswana doing that. And it was pretty fascinating. But then the Botswana government didn't really think I was educated enough to work in their country, so they kicked me out. Yeah, fun times.
Did you try hugging their prime minister?
I should have, though. They really love their president. They really do. The president's face is if you go into any business in Botswana, the president's face is on the wall. So here we are. I was in Botswana for 6 months, and then they revoked my visa and said, see you later. You're not educated enough to be running a business in our country.
Even though you already were.
Yeah, even though I already was. Anyway, that's fine. Look, we
pivot again.
We pivot again. And I've been doing family portraits in rural areas since I've been back in the last 9 or 10 months, and going to some of the most remote places in Australia and taking photos of people on their property because no one else is doing that either. I like to do things differently.
Are you enjoying photography again? Like, did you have, I mean, apart from the safari stuff, did you have a bit of a break from that, or has that been your constant throughout this whole period?
Photography's always been my bread and butter. The first time I picked up a camera, I think, was in 2008, actually. So I was a real estate agent and I was pretty young, a new real estate agent, and I just changed offices in June of 2008. And do you remember what happened in July 2008? July/August 2008?
So the GFC?
Yeah, that's when the GFC hit. So I was the first to get axed from that office, which was I was pretty sad at the time about that because I was doing quite well and working really hard. And then I started doing real estate photography. So that was I've done a lot of things.
Just making gravy.
Making gravy. And then, yeah, I've done multiple things in photography now. But, yeah, I've gone from, photographing brides to baboons and now back to babies. So yeah, look, bread and butter has been photography. I do enjoy it, but it's treated me very well and it's given me a lot of opportunities. I think I'm going through, it's a bit of an existential midlife crisis at the moment. I don't know if anyone else does that when they're 40, but yeah, I think I'm sort of changing about what life means to me now and how my purpose, I think it's always important. Everyone needs purpose, right? I think one of my favorite stories is when I was doing some drought advocacy work, I came across a farmer. He was a bachelor, he had sheep, and he was destocking every single head of sheep he had. Like, he was getting rid of them all because he couldn't afford to feed them, and it was just so prolonged, this drought. And I said to him, keep 3. Just keep 3. And he's like, why? And I said, because no matter what, you still have to get out of bed every day to feed those 3 sheep. Even if it takes you 5 minutes, it still gives you the most minuscule sense of purpose. And I think no matter what, purpose doesn't have to be on a grand scale. Purpose doesn't have to be changing the world, but everyone needs a reason to get out of bed every day. And I think my purpose right now is changing a little bit to like more probably like doing things like growing my own vegetables and being a bit more self-reliant. And, I'm not at the stage to buy some cats, but maybe I will get there. I don't know. But yeah, I think my purpose is more now about maybe like community in a smaller logistical area, or like I've always traveled and I've always been quite what's the word? I've always been on the road and I've always been living out of a suitcase. And now I think I'm at the time in my life I do want to build more community and have a sense of purpose within that community. I think that's becoming more important to me as I age.
So you heard it here first. Edwina Robertson is laying down some roots.
Yes.
And buying some cats.
Yes, buying some cats.
Tending to some vegetables and building a tiny home. Is that right?
Yes, I'm currently building a tiny home. So funnily enough, living in Africa, in Botswana, in the bush in Botswana, hated it initially. We had no mail. We had no phone reception aside from Starlink when you left the house or the lodge initially it was hard to really adjust to that pace of life, but by the time I left, I loved it. I was like, this is amazing. And I think that coming back to Australia, I was like, oh, I've always lived in inner city Brisbane and the hustle and bustle, and now I'm like, no, give me a few acres and I'm building a tiny house. So I am really sort of talking more about self-sufficiency and having a bit more of a grounded life. So my life is going towards that direction with the tiny house. And yeah, I just don't need as many material things anymore. It's life, the purpose of life has changed.
It doesn't sound like you've ever had them. You got rid of them to go around Australia.
Yeah.
You got rid of them to go to Africa. Yeah. Do you have anything left?
Oh, no, I don't have much. I don't have much at all. I still haven't. Well, I've been back in Australia for 10 months and when we connected for this podcast and you said you were from East Coast Car Rentals, I thought you knew that I've actually been hiring an East Coast car rental for the last 10 months. I still don't own a car. I've just been hiring from you guys for 10 months. So, yeah, but look, of all the rental car, and I'm not because it's your podcast, but yeah, I've been consistently renting from you guys for that long. So that says something about your business model. So thanks for that.
Good. Thank you very much. So before we wrap up, what's next? I mean, obviously there's the tiny home and vegetables and that kind of thing, but I assume that rural message is still your message and something that you'll continue to push forward the entirety of your life.
Yeah, rural Australia is something that's pretty important to me. And I think there is still the disconnect is getting wider between rural and metropolitan Australia. I have this burning urge to teach people how to grow their own food. I really do. I don't know how that looks or what that looks like, but I think it's an important skill. Like, you know, I've got plenty of friends who are 40 years old and wouldn't even know how to grow a vegetable. Like, that's crazy. Like, like, isn't that crazy? I think that's wild.
In the world that we're living in too, I think, we're facing some pretty heavy financial or economical issues throughout the world at the moment. It's probably a skill that a lot of people should look into doing.
Yeah, I think there's two ways the world could be changing. I think there's going to be some tough times, but I also think there's going to be some beauty that's formed out of those tough times. People getting back to their, for lack of a better term, roots and learning skills like how to grow your own food or, you know, just things like that. And I think it's a really vital skill. It's just, yeah, it's wild to me that I've got friends in their mid-50s wouldn't even know how to grow a pot of basil. Like, we are so reliant on big corporations and everyone else to look after us. You know, and I think we're the only species in the world that relies on something else to be able to feed us, which is kind of part of staying alive, really, isn't it? So, yeah, I've got this urge to grow my own food and teach people how to do that. I just haven't figured out, or I haven't sat down and really felt into how that looks. Maybe it's through social media, or maybe it's through courses, or maybe it's through just community projects or something like that. But I'm sure it'll unfold as it needs to.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Obviously, it's not just about social media and your platform. Your ability to tell stories is second to none. I think you've become an icon of that in Australia. So as one person that follows on to a lot of those stories, thank you. If anyone wants to find you, how can they do it?
Well, I'm not really on Facebook.
It's not bull anymore.
But I do Instagram, Edwina Robertson. That's probably the best way to... Oh, look, I am on Facebook, but I don't really actively use Facebook.
Is that just for the cat meme?
Yeah, that's just for the cat memes. Yeah, I'm on Edwina Robertson. If you type that in, I'll come up somewhere.
And trust me, if you just Google Edwina Robertson, you'll see everything, the whole history, the podcast, the whole lot. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks, Ben.
Cheers.